I would like to share with you an experience I had about 10 years ago, give or take. I learned several years after this incident. What happened to me is what doctors call sleep paralysis. I say they're full of BS. This really happened. I don't use drugs outside of caffeine and nicotine. I don't drink alcohol of any sort. So this was not a hallucination caused by either of the two. Nor do I have any mental issues that I know of. Let's make that clear. Going back about a year before this incident, at that time, I was really into ghost hunting shows. I watched and recorded any and every show I could find that was about a team of ghost hunters investigating haunted places. Some were really good, and others just sucked. No disrespect. I remember watching one of the shows where the lead hunter is a muscle-bound jerk who didn't like bullies, but, in turn, is one himself. He orders his crew around like he owns them, and they follow him blindly like sheep. I think you know the one I'm talking about. It's a good show, at least it used to be. Anyway, they were investigating a bar owned by an old country singer located in one of the southern states who wrote a semi-popular song about a girl. Everyone in the paranormal community says that this bar is truly haunted. They were down in the basement, I think. It's been a while since I've seen it, and to this day, is the only episode of that show I will never watch again. They were talking with some guy about what goes on there, when up in the left top corner of the screen, there appeared to be a shadowy figure wearing a cowboy hat standing in the doorway. At this time in the show, they stopped the film and pointed out that when they were actually down there, they didn't see this figure and only discovered it while reviewing the footage. I was naive back then and didn't really know much about the paranormal. I figured, it's a TV show, what harm could it really do? But boy, was I wrong. I now know that ghosts, entities, or whatever you want to call them, can follow you home from places and are made up of energy and can travel through any energy source they want to. And this one did. Many years before this incident, an old friend of mine, back when I was 11 or 12, who I met through playing baseball in the same team, he had recently bought a house and was looking for someone to just give his old trailer mobile home to, which is where this incident happened. We had lost contact over the years, but unbeknownst to me, he had kept in contact with my father. My father gave him my number. He called me up and made me an offer I couldn't refuse. A free trailer just to pay lot rent? Oh heck yeah, I'll take that. The trailer was old and needed work, but it was a good deal. I moved in, did some minor repairs, and a couple of weeks after that, I invited my father and stepmother over for dinner. My stepmother is what she calls an old soul. She can sense when things are not right with the universe. She took one look at the place and said, "There's bad juju here. I don't like it." And every time she came to visit, she was nervous. She wouldn't sit still, always looking down the hallway. And she eventually stopped coming. She said it was too thick for her, whatever that meant. I just thought she was nuts. I now know she's not. I lived there for many years, had some strange things happen, seeing apparitions out of the corner of my eyes, voices, cold breezes, etc. I just chalked it up to bad lighting, outside noises, and insulation issues. Some rational explanation. Until that night. The night that changed my whole belief systems forever. That night, I will never forget. I was lying in bed, asleep on my back, like I always do, when I woke up and noticed a black figure standing in the doorway of my bedroom. The hallway light was on. I always leave it on in case I need to make a bathroom run late at night. The light from behind the figure showed that it had a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs, but no eyes. It was just standing there. I blinked a couple of times to make sure I wasn't seeing what I was seeing, and sure enough, I was. Only this time, when I looked at it, it was wearing a cowboy hat. The moment I realized that, I physically saw it jump from the standing position in the doorway over to the top of my bed and land on top of me. My body became stiff, unable to move. Out of my peripheral vision, I could see my wife lying next to me, sound asleep. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I saw the figure sitting on top of me. It reached its hands down into my chest and started squeezing my lungs. I couldn't breathe. It was squeezing the life right out of me. There I was, gasping for air, paralyzed, and unable to make a sound. And just when I thought I was about to die, a series of intense bright white lights started flashing all around the room, like a strobe light on steroids. I closed my eyes to shield them from the lights. It was that bright. All of a sudden, my body jerked a couple of times, like a convulsion, and then stopped. I opened my eyes, and it was gone. The figure was gone. I was able to breathe again. I lied there, heavily breathing for a good 20 minutes, too scared to even move. When I finally got the nerve to try, I slowly moved my right hand over to my nightstand. Still shaking from fear, I grabbed my phone to check the time. The time was 3:48 a.m., the witching hour. And needless to say, I did not go back to sleep that night. I cautiously got out of bed, so not to wake up my wife, and turned on every light in the house. Every single one, including all the bedroom lights. How my wife stayed sleeping, I don't know, but thankfully she did. I made a pot of coffee, grabbed my Bible, and sat at the dining room table, drinking coffee, Bible in hand, until the morning came. I must have smoked at least a pack and a half of cigarettes in that 3-hour span of time. I'm good with that. I'm still alive. I asked my wife if she had seen or heard anything strange the night before. She said no, and I left it at that. I didn't tell her what had happened, and still haven't. She probably wouldn't believe me anyway. My wife and I stayed at the trailer for about 2 months after that. When we got the opportunity to rent an actual house, we took it. We packed all our things and moved out. On the last day that we were ever at that trailer, my wife had left the vacuum in the back bedroom where this whole experience had happened. She asked if I would go and get it, and I grudgingly agreed. When I entered into the bedroom, a weird sense of dread overcame me, and something inside of me told me I needed to get out of there quickly. I grabbed the vacuum, ran down the hallway, and out the front door as fast as I could, slamming the door behind me. I then turned around and yelled, "You want this place? You can have it. I'm gone." My wife looked at me like I lost my mind. My father and stepmother helped us move, along with some friends. My stepmother insisted that we drive all the vehicles that contained our belongings over bodies of water to block any of the bad juju from coming with us to the new house. We did, and have had no bad experiences in our new house. Well, that's my story. I don't really care if you believe me or not, because I know for a fact that this really happened. I remember when I was around the age of 5, my family and I lived in a small apartment on the 4th floor, which was pretty high up. And the apartment was full of crazy people, full of drug addicts and other low-life criminals. There were no other kids in the unit, so I mainly spent my time playing with my toys. One night, after my mother turned off the lights for bedtime, the whole family went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m. I was pretty thirsty, so I was going to grab a cup of water from the kitchen. But as I was pulling off my blankets, I heard noises. Noises coming from the other side of the apartment. Being only 5, I didn't think anything of it, so I got up and walked out of my bedroom. The moon was lighting up the room through the open sliding door to the veranda, but then I came to the terrifying realization that the sliding door was supposed to be closed. I knew this because I was the one who closed it before bed, but at that moment, I heard those noises again, and they were coming from the kitchen. I put 2 and 2 together and realized that someone was inside our apartment. I tried tiptoeing to my parents' room, but I looked behind me, and what I saw terrified me. It was a man in a costume. He looked at me and grabbed me. He was pulling my hair and putting his hand in my mouth, but I broke out of his grip and ran to my mother's room. I was too scared to say anything. The next morning, I told my mother everything, but she told me it was all just a wild nightmare. I tried to tell my dad, but he said the same thing. Only I know what happened, but no one believes me. I will never forget the sack he wore over his head. And the thing that still bothers me is how did he manage to get to the 4th floor? The door was locked, and so were the windows. So did he climb the entire building? And if he did, why me? This is my true story. I live in an old apartment building. I've been here for about 2 years, and my roommate and I have had very few scary experiences so far, except for this one that happened last summer. It was around 4 in the morning when we were woken up from a deep sleep by the fire alarms going off throughout our entire 4-story apartment building. Seeing as this place is occupied mostly by seniors, we figured someone had left a pot on the stove again. I grumbled and blindly grabbed for a blanket. Last time we had a false alarm, I was left shivering and barefoot on the sidewalk waiting for the fire department, and I wasn't about to let that happen again. My roommate and I put on our shoes. I grabbed my phone and keys, and we poked out our head into the hallway. Nothing seemed off. The hall was empty. No one else had come out of their apartments yet. Reluctantly, my roommate and I walked down the hall toward the lobby. We figured our neighbors would soon follow suit. It was only when we went through the lobby and out the front door that we realized something was actually wrong. A handful of people who had already come out of the building were running and shouting about how the building was actually on fire this time. We followed them around to the side of the building as more and more people fled in their pajamas, and to our horror, we saw an apartment on the top floor belching out flames. People were frantic, searching for water, a ladder, anything. Someone remarked that there was a lady who lived in the apartment who had mobility issues and she needed to be rescued now. And where the heck was the fire department? My roommate was quite disturbed by the whole scene, so we decided to go back to the front of the building, away from the fire. On our way, we saw a guy jump off his balcony to the ground. He rolled when he landed, but I think it still really hurt, judging from how he sat on the grass and groaned for a while. He was lucky to only be on the 2nd floor. There was chaos, yelling, screaming, and an odd mix of panic and disinterest, especially among the senior citizens who didn't want to leave the building because using the stairs was so difficult. The fire department arrived much quicker than they had ever done before, seeing at this time was a real emergency, and it wasn't long before elderly ladies in nightgowns were being rescued via ladders and and wheeled off to the hospital next door. At one point, the man who lived below the apartment on fire had a screaming episode at one of the landlords, the one that looked like a walking skeleton with an oxygen tank on a scooter. By the time the fire department got everything under control, it was around 7 a.m. The sun was up and the people were beginning their morning commute. The fire department had blocked off our whole street, which must have been a pain, and the entire population of my building sat on the curb in pajamas and blankets. Little kids, old people, broke college kids, the works. The community really pulled together that morning. The public bus service gave a couple of buses to sit and warm up in instead of standing around on the chilly sidewalks. Paramedics handed out blankets and assessed the injuries. The people in the surrounding houses were kind enough to bring us water and snacks. One lady brought a serving tray with mugs of tea from her own kitchen and offered it to anyone she could find. My mom came down to rescue my roommate and I, even though she lived an hour outside the town and hadn't even showered yet. She brought us breakfast and a change of clothes, as we didn't know when we'd be allowed back into the building. The most disturbing details of what had just taken place that morning came to us as we were waiting on the bus. Everyone was talking about the fire, of course, but one man had a particularly horrifying detail to add. He had heard through the grapevine that the lady whose apartment caught fire never made it out of the building. Sadly, we suspected as much, with her mobility issues and all. But there was more. The firefighters apparently found her in the hall. She had made it out of her apartment, but couldn't escape the smoke. Whether she died from smoke inhalation or from burns, we aren't sure. But one thing that man said that sticks with me is that someone said that as they stood outside and watched the flames, they heard the woman screaming, "Help me, I'm burning." I've always been afraid of burning to death, and the idea that my neighbor may have had such a horrifying end is deeply disturbing. I know the man who lived below her heard her screaming. He wouldn't stop talking about it. I think he ended up with a form of PTSD from this event, and I don't blame him. We were all brought to a community center where the fire department and emergency response volunteers helped bring some clarity to the situation and told us what to expect. Everyone was very kind and sympathetic to us. Whatever we needed, they provided for us. I think all that is pretty standard procedure, but still, I was extremely thankful to the kindness of the volunteers, firefighters, paramedics, and Good Samaritans. It was pretty surreal to be in a situation like that. We had almost nothing on us. My roommate hadn't thought to grab her phone, so she had to borrow mine to let her family know that she was okay. We had no money, no ID, none of the essentials, and we had no idea how long we would be homeless. I hadn't been so happy to have my mom with me in a long time. I felt like a scared little girl, even if I didn't show it. We were lucky. The fire happened on the opposite end of the building from us. Our unit was totally unaffected, and we were one of the few allowed back into our apartment that same day. The building stunk of smoke for the next few weeks. Even though the fire took place on the 4th floor in a single apartment, the damage was extensive. Even on the ground floor, the walls were blackened with ash. When they attempted to start fixing up the building, they found asbestos in the walls. A few people were forced to move out of their apartments, and we're talking people who had lived here for around 30 years. I remember the night we were allowed back into our apartment. I wanted to box up most of my important possessions and keep them in my car, as if I thought the building was going to catch fire again. My home didn't feel safe anymore, and it wouldn't for several weeks. It would take a long time for us to hear anything about what caused the fire. Last I heard, a space heater was to blame, but I don't know for sure. In the days that followed, the fire was featured on the front page of the local paper. The family that lived just down the hall from us were featured in the picture. The article spelled out the details that I've already heard. It labeled the guy that lived below the fire as a hero for attempting to save the lady upstairs. It was a valiant effort, but there was nothing he could have done without endangering himself. I feel sorry for him, and I often wonder if the guilt keeps him up at night. Sometimes I think about the lady who passed away in this building. I listen to a lot of ghost stories, so I wonder if her spirit haunts this place. Her sudden and horrifying death would be the sort of thing that makes a ghost linger on Earth, wouldn't it? So many things left unfinished. Regardless, I hope she's at peace, and I hope that my neighbors have been able to find some semblance of peace as well. 4 months later, we've regained a sense of normalcy. Things are back to how they once were before, if you ignore the orange tarps around the side of the exterior, the restoration vans that come and go every day, and the security guards stationed in the lobby. The damaged wing is still closed while they try to sort out the asbestos situation. But for those who live on the other end of the building, things are relatively normal, and I hope they stay that way. Thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you had a good scare or two. And if you did, give this video a thumbs up so we can spread the nightmares around. Stay haunted, my friends. I'll see you next time.